Ken and I also have some additional materials that you'll receive as well. So welcome. Today's webinar is hosted by the DBHR through Washington State's Healthcare Authority. Again, very interactive. Please raise your hand, unmute your mic, or use the chat when we are asking for some engagement. And just a little note, we've added this recently about artificial intelligence, just the use of automated note-taking bots or similar tools during the sessions do require prior approval, and any unauthorized use is prohibited. We want to ensure the confidentiality of the participants here. And again, speaking of confidentiality, please be mindful when you are engaging with us to be aware of individuals' confidentiality. So certainly no names or any other identifying information. And the AI recording of the session is also prohibited. So we will get started. Today is our third learning community on motivational interviewing, and we're going to follow up with the discussion of change talk. Last week or last month, I guess it's been a month already. Last month we talked about you kind of hearing and focusing on change talk, and this is now how to reinforce change talk when you're hearing that from individuals you're working with. And again, just kind of use the chat. Tell us your name, your job role, the organization, and if you want to pop in kind of why you wanted to come to today's learning community, what brought you to the learning community, what's your interest in motivational interviewing or your interest in change talk. You can continue to use the chat for that, but we are going to get started. So anyone who hasn't been here, we meet on the fourth Tuesday of every month from 9 to 10, and it really is about peer learning and hearing from one another and hearing from Ken and me, all about motivational interviewing. So we've been kind of talking initially about the spirit of MI, the process of MI. Last session, we talked about kind of focusing on change goals. Today, we're really going to dive into reinforcing and recognizing change talk. So we really want you to share ideas, have questions that you might have. Consider this a space for discussion, a very collaborative environment, and also an opportunity to network with fellow providers. And that's kind of why we use the chat also to introduce yourself so that you can get a sense of who else is on the call. And maybe there are people here that you want to network with and collaborate with. This really isn't a substitute for formal training, so please look out. Ken and I did a 4-part webinar series on motivational interviewing that was more learning specific, where we, presented information, skills building. These learning communities are really focused on you having an opportunity to practice some of the skills and learn from each other. So we'll have some opportunities later on in today's session to practice some of the tools that we've been reviewing. We're not going to use breakout sessions. We've kind of learned over the last few sessions that they're not the most effective and people kind of prefer the larger group. So that's what we'll do. And people are continuing to join. So please introduce yourself, agency, what your role is. If you want to talk a little bit in your intro about what drew you to today's learning community, that would be great too. So just to reorient you, we talked about helping people focus on their change goals already. We're going to recognize and reinforce change talk today. Then we get into, for April and May, practicing the specific techniques of OARs, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. And then in June, we're going to move into our final learning community session, which is recognizing stage of change and helping someone, helping you identify different strategies and interventions for specific stages of change that the person might be in. So kind of focusing now on the last month. If you've attended last month's, great. If not, kind of just reflect back. in your own practice and services that you're providing, think about what's one success over the past few months related to motivational interviewing. So something that maybe a strategy that you used, or maybe you were able to kind of embody some of those elements of the spirit of MI. But think about what is the success? So, what's been working well? What contributed to the success? Maybe think about how have your interactions changed with individuals you're working with? And what are you doing to sustain your use of motivational interviewing with MI, with individuals? So again, you could use the chat or unmute your mics. But think about over the last month or two, or, it doesn't have to just be the last month, but think about what's been something that you have felt has been successful in your MI, or attempting to use motivational interviewing. Okay, Carrie, thank you for adding that into the chat. I find the open-ended questions really help me identify what folks are truly concerned about. So you're identifying the use of open-ended questions and how that's been effective for you to really help you identify what people are concerned about. And if you think about that, Carrie, what do you think contributed to that success? So I'll let you think about that a little bit. Again, you can unmute your mic and we can have a discussion. Mel in the chat is talking about reflection statements have helped me to indicate that I'm trying to hear and understand the person. Excellent.
Yeah. This is Carrie. I was going to
Hi,
say,
Carrie. Great.
with the open-ended questions, really helps me sort of probe into like what referrals would be most helpful. But in general, like for me, I'm still practicing using MI because not all of it comes to me naturally,
Mhm.
which is why I'm here.
Yes, great. That's wonderful. Ken, any others in the chat?
Let's see. I see from Mel, reflections have helped indicate that I'm trying to hear and understand the person. Identifying individual strengths, about open-ended questions, getting some feedback about that. We also got a question from people who didn't attend our trainings in the fall about whoever set these trainings up for you, the recordings of all of them are available there. So if you're just coming into this part because you just got hired or whatever reason, they have the recordings so you can use those to catch up.
Tina is writing in the chat, I mirror the client's answers, and this seems to build trust and helps the client to open up, especially new ones. Absolutely. A supportive and safe environment combined with in-person sessions enables the client to freely express their emotions and effectively alleviate feelings of stress. This approach fosters openness, emotional release, and overall well-being. I love it. Thank you, Nadia. And then think about too, and you can either use the chat to tell us or kind of just think on your own about ways that you're sustaining your use of MI. So maybe that's practicing with your colleagues, or maybe it's, if you have supervision on a regular basis, maybe it's, it's carving out some time during your supervision meetings to practice or talk about how you're using motivational interviewing with individuals you're working with. But the bottom line is to continue to practice it and to really think about how you're sustaining that use of MI when you're working with individuals.
I'll tell you the biggest difference that I noticed when I learned right off the bat was that I found I was listening to clients all the way to the end of their sentences. I
Mhm.
wasn't jumping in on the end of their sentences with an idea of how to fix things. And of course, instead of listening to them, I'd been putting together what I was going to say back to them.
Mhm.
It was almost like a mild version of an argument. In an argument, you don't let the other person finish. You immediately kind of one up them and dive in while they're still going. And even though that wasn't what I was trying to do, my desire to have the right answer and to fix and to do all that stuff meant that I missed the end of everything. And unfortunately, the end of everything was where there was a lot of good stuff. And it also made it easier for me. It kind of reduced my own tension and nervousness in a session. And then I also think that the other person felt like they were heard more because I wasn't jumping right in. Like it's okay if they said something and I sat back and thought about it for a bit, before saying something. Or like you've indicated, where you mirror something that they say, you send what they say back to them so they can see how it sounds to their ear. I think it's a really good technique.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mel wrote, yeah, all the MI techniques promote a setting that's non-judgmental. MI turns it from how can I win this argument to what would be helpful to this person to align with their values, goals, and dreams. Yes.
absolutely. That's a very nice encapsulation of that whole phenomenon. Because this was not second nature to me either. Not at all. Now I don't know I'm doing it. So I've gone to that level. But in the beginning, it was not intuitive to me at all. Just being able to hear somebody all the way out was a bit of a challenge.
Mhm. So we talked about some successes that you've all had. What's been a challenge over the past few months or couple of months to using motivational interviewing? What's been difficult? What's helped you to overcome this challenge? What may have been more helpful? We'll give you some time to use the chat, or if you wanted to unmute or raise your hand, that's fine too.
I guess I have a challenge, David. I got up here that um, it's hard for me sometimes to get words in, um, and then she shares, and then she waits for me to see if I'm going to say something negative or just that she has that background where she was always told she's doing something wrong, and so
Mm.
the challenge for me is. Um, do I say something or do I just hear her out and not try to give her some type of information? Because I see that I'm just looking at the nonverbals and I'm seeing she's waiting for me to say something so I could be just like those other people that put her down or make
Something
something.
negative or
Yeah.
or something directive. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's been my challenge, and I had a few sessions with this individual, and it's been almost the same thing every time, and it's almost like a victim. I can't do this, I can't do that. Everybody's looking at me, everybody's judging me, and I try to just hear her out without because I get
Mhm.
that look. Come on, like say something. But yeah, that's my challenge.
I heard you describe a few things. And first of all, what you're doing is a good thing. You're not just by not feeding into the narrative, that's a
Mhm.
good thing. Just by hearing her out and not playing. And that whole thing of extinction, if somebody keeps doing something and it doesn't get that result, eventually, hopefully that help contributes to change. The first thing that I heard you say was that she will go for a while about something. And it might be hard to get a word in during that time when she's going. First of all, again, that's not bad to let her run her course. For me, the MI technique that helps with that is a summary where it's okay to say, all right, I want to make sure I got what you said. You threw a lot by me, and I want to make sure I got it. And then you do kind of do that summary where here's what we got so far. Did I get it right? Did I get that all right? And then the person can correct if there was anything that was wrong or wasn't said. And then the second piece is that just affirmations. It sounds like this person has been under affirmed. You know, if they've been in the presence of so much criticism and negativity that they expect it. Um, so those are the two techniques that I was hearing. One, you know, even if someone's going for a while and said, look, even if it's like, okay, can you give me a minute? You've sent a lot by me and I want to make sure I have it. I don't want to miss any of this. And again, that's also validating that person. This is worth hearing and I don't want to miss any. So those two techniques are what I'm hearing from there. I'm open to suggestions from what other people have heard or other thoughts about that. But you're also doing a great thing just by not feeding in. That might be the important thing, is this thing that always happens to me isn't happening here. And that really helps build that therapeutic alliance with someone.
Yeah, I sense that I'm building some trust from the first session to we've been to a few sessions already. So yeah, I feel like that trust is getting built. I'm not that finger pointing person, but I do a lot of reflection. And there's affirmations in there as well, but it's really this certain individual, it's really sensitive. So I gotta really try not to say much or fix things.
You nailed it. The two things that feel like kind of landmines in this situation are uh, anything that could be deemed as critical, and what we always do is directive. You know, okay, well, let's start moving in this direction. Let's start moving in that way. It's the what you're doing is the pulling alongside part, which is really, really important.
Thank you.
A few things in the chat here, Ken. I still struggle with staying in empathy too long. Also, I worry about that I come across as agreeing with the person rather than reflecting back what they are telling me. This is especially troublesome because I may not always agree at all with the person, so I don't want to be inauthentic.
Right. Right. Yeah, that one we run into that one a lot. I work in a state psychiatric hospital, so we work with a lot of people that are really psychotic, and you want and so you're in this sort of, it would be almost a double bind where you want to hear what they have to say without signing off on it. So if someone, you know, one of the conversations that we have a gentleman in the hospital who's convinced he's a member of the English royal family and that they've imprisoned him in the state psychiatric hospital. Um, so on one hand, I want to hear his story. I want to hear what his, you know, reality is. And I was admonished by some of the nursing staff who were saying, well, look, if you get him talking about this stuff, you're just reinforcing it. Like, no, I'm not agreeing to it, but I'm hearing his side of the story. And I want to make sure that I have it right. Kind of like we were just saying with David. I want to get the whole story so that I have it right. That's the whole purpose of it. I'm not signing on to anything or I'm not agreeing to anything. I just want to have it right so that I can ask questions later on. Um, so I don't think there's anything wrong with staying in the empathy place and hearing somebody, unless you actually say that you're agreeing, all you're doing is getting their story so that you got it. That's it. You're not necessarily agreeing with what they're saying. You're just hearing them. And then you'll get down the road later on, you start asking questions like, how does this work? Like, for example, with this particular client I was talking about, I said, have you always felt that you remember the English royal family? Have there been times where you haven't been sure or less sure or, you know, so then you look for the discrepancy and you get to all that stuff later on, but you can't do that right at the beginning. Um,
And then
the other
another,
question I saw in there is times when am I
yes.
indicated. The two that jump out at me, and there are probably more. One is if somebody's ready to go. If somebody comes right to you and they're in the action stage, you don't have to go through all of this, you know, all of these steps. This is really geared more toward people that are in the earlier stages of change. If they're ready to go, then let's go. You can still use these techniques. I mean, particularly um, darn, which we'll talk about, because I like to find out why someone's ready to make the change. Like, what's their reason? There's 100 different reasons to quit smoking, but only the one that the client has is the one that matters. You know, if it's too expensive, that's it. If they're having a baby, that's it. Whatever it is, but that will help you later on in keeping them on the path to change. There are some people that it's a little difficult to communicate with them. I think some people with severe symptomatic or cognitive deficits, it might be a little tougher to do this sort of abstract sort of work. I'm not an expert in geriatric clients, but I wonder about that one as well. whether it's a matter of being shorter and more directive and working in those areas. I mean, there's probably some of you that have more experience in those populations than I do. Those are the places where I still use the tools. To me, the tools are just conversational, but I don't use the whole thing all the time because I don't feel that it's always necessary. And I'm seeing in the comments neurodivergent. That's a really good point. They may not respond to that level of communication as well, particularly things that are abstract.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I think for the interest of time,
Great
we're going to move
question.
into, yes, great questions. So Ken's going to give a quick review of the darn and kind of what our plan for the remainder of today's session is. So Ken, if you want to take that.
Sure. Sure, let's do it. So, again, some of you have been through this before. Some of you I know are just coming in new to this. So, we'll do a quick review of Darn, and we'll do the Darn exercise again, which maybe some of you remember. So, what Darn stands for is the types of change talk. In fact, we're going to go into all of it, which is the Darn cat, but we're really going to focus on the Darn. So, when someone is talking about change, and one of the major if there's an art to motivational interviewing, one of the real techniques in this is somebody could give you a whole paragraph about why they don't want to change, but if they make one statement about wanting to change, you grab that one, pay attention to that one, and go forward with it. And that's how you sort of non-directly influence change. And it's particularly important what type of change talk you're hearing from your client. So DARN is an acronym for this sort of first early types of change talk. So D stands for desire, and we've all said these things before. And how you recognize them is the verbs. So if you say, I want to, I'd like to, I wish, these are all statements of desire, regardless what the change is. The verb is the giveaway, whether it's wanting a new job or wanting to be on or off a certain type of medication or whatever it is. I want, I'd like to, I wish. A stands for ability. How able or how easy or how difficult do you view this change as being? I can do this. I could do this. So again, the verbs are sort of the giveaway to tell you which category somebody's coming from. Now, R, reason is a little tricky. It sounds like desire, but the difference is this is almost like what you would call a secondary gain. So say you really don't want to go back to school, but you want a higher paying job. The reason for going back to school might be the higher paying job. So it's a step on the way of getting where you want to be. So if I do this, then this good thing happens. And that's what the reason is. An example I've always kidded about is, I've always wanted to, I want to stay at my weight or lose a little weight so that I don't have to buy more clothes. That's like a secondary gain for me is I don't want to do this thing. So it's the if and then. And then the last one is and the need for change. And this is the need to, have to, got to. This is a measure of, I almost want to say pressure or urgency. And my view of this is this can come from within or without. You can say to yourself, I have to do this. I need to do this. I've got to do this. Or it can come from outside, say a doctor, a boss, your spouse or partner, anything along those lines. So you can put this internal pressure on yourself, or there can be external pressure there. And these are all different dimensions of this early stage of preparatory change talk. Here are some examples right here. Desire, I want to identify a career. I can get a job is an example of ability. Here's the example we gave before, reason. If I go back to school, then I can get a higher paying job. I'm teaching master's students now, so I'm seeing a lot of people who are back at school wanting to get a higher paying job. They're not happy now, but they're on the way. They're on the way to where they want to be. And then need, I've got to get a new job, or, very often a lot of self-care things come under need. I don't want to do this, but I have to change my diet, or I have to start exercising, or I have to even think about something along the lines of medication, something along those lines, something I don't necessarily want to do, but there's a have to involved. So this is the second part of this. I don't get nearly as much use out of this as I do the darn, but it does work in a similar manner. So once someone has gone past that point of doing all the darn talk, and you start hearing what they call commitment speech, and this is I will, I'm going to. That's commitment language. And to me, commitment language always sounds like a New Year's resolution. What do you, what do you know? I'm going to do this year. I'm going to do that this year. By the way, we're at the end of March. That means most people's New Year's resolutions are ancient history, but that's okay. You know, don't make major life changes while you're eating and drinking. Probably there might be a lesson there. But commitment speech actually is the one that corresponds in the research with change actually happening. So darn leads to see. And by the time we get to see, now the research shows that people actually start um, affecting the change. So A, activation is about, why now? What are you going to do right now? Why is this the time that this is going to happen? Again, the urgency and all that kind of stuff. And then T is when they're actually taking steps. So now this is when action begins to get taken. Maybe it might not even be the decisive action that makes it, but things are actually moving. What's not the whole staircase, but the first step, as the saying goes. So Darn Cat kind of elaborates this whole process of change talk from wishing basically to the point of where things are actually happening. So examples of this, I will submit applications for a new job. I will. I'm ready to lose weight. So now's the time for this thing to happen. Everything else has been there, but now is when the time is. And collecting applications from stores in town being those steps. Again, it hasn't made the goal happen yet, but these are like the objectives on the way starting to get addressed. So, oh, that's right. We were talking about this. I don't know if anybody did this assignment from before. Did anybody actually run the darn ruler on somebody since we met last? Because I know when we did the training, we had you do it on yourselves, and we're actually going to review that again in a little bit.
I just put a copy of the darn ruler in the chat too, so you can open it up, but we also are, have one to show here on the slides as well.
Yeah, I love this tool and find it incredibly helpful because it helps me to learn, what the person wants to change, and then actually more importantly, why.
Yeah.
What's driving this, and if there is a deficit somewhere, or if there's a weak point in their motivation, where is it? Very often, that's the place that I have to go and address to see, to move change forward. If you find out somebody's darn, you probably find out why the change hasn't happened yet, and that's a critical piece. So I don't know. Did anybody get a chance to try this out in between, from last session to now? And you could just add that in the chat if you've had that experience, or unmute and just tell us. All right. If you can share later on if you'd like, or what we're going to do now is we're going to review it again anyway. So if if it's a matter of just getting more practice or getting more comfort with it, because we did do the training on this a little while ago, we'll address it now.
Here's the darn.
So here's the darn ruler. So we'll do exactly what we did before. In fact, I was thinking about this earlier this morning. Brownie points if you did this before and still have your scores from last time, because you could actually compare from then to now, which would be interesting. But if not, and if this is the first time you're seeing it or your first time going through it, so here's what we're going to do. The simple instructions are, I want you to think not about your clients, but about yourself. I want you to think about a behavior that you would like to change but haven't changed yet. Now, the good news of this is you're not going to be sharing this with us or with anybody, so it's confidential. We're going to go through this and get your darn scores, and I will ask you to share your darn scores, but again, not what the change is. This one is that is your business, so it can be whatever you want it to be. And then we'll take those darn scores and we'll do some of the interventions that I do um, with that. Okay, and I saw some feedback about making the screen bigger so you can see. It might be a little tough to read. If you
It's
have the
also in the
handout,
chat. Yeah, it's also
yeah,
in the chat if it's helpful to just click on the MI Rise darn ruler file in the chat. You'll be able to put it
yep,
on your screen. But yes,
put it on your
I
screen
will
and
let me see if I can make this bigger. So
blow it up. And I'll take you through the whole thing verbally as well. So if you still have trouble seeing it, oh yeah, if you could you do that too, that'd be great.
yeah, let me just pull it up.
So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you for four numbers, and that's all that you're going to share. And my suggestion is, I was thinking it might be easier if you don't send in each score one at a time, but we wait till we do all four, and then you send us the four numbers in a sequence in the chat. So enter the scores in the chat as we go, but don't return them to us. Just keep them. And so then you can send it once with all four of your scores. And that way we can look at all of them uh, next to each other. I have some hypotheses whenever we do this, and I always look to see whether whether those hypotheses bear out or not. So if you know the behavior that you would like to change, let's start out with desire. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is the least and 10 is the most, how much do you want to change this thing? 10 is the absolute most. You want to change it more than anything. 1 is like me getting rid of books, not very motivated. Don't send all the scores to us yet. Just type it in and hang on to it, and we'll do all four. If you sent one along, that's fine too. And we'll go from there. Um, and we'll get to that other question later. I'm going to move to ability next. So next up is ability on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is, it's impossible, and 10 is, it's easy. How much would you say you can change this thing? So again, somewhere between 1 and 10. Next up is reason. On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is not much and 10 is a lot, how much would this change help you in other ways? Think about the example of, I really don't want to go back to school, but I want a higher paying job. That would be, this is how you would gauge the reason. Another example I've heard is someone who wants their kids back, but they can't do that until they stop drinking. They really want their kids back, may not want to stop drinking so much. And then the last one is need. Yep. The last one is need on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is not much and 10 is a lot. How much would you say you need to change this due to pressure from yourself or others? So 10 is you're getting maximum pressure um, or putting maximum pressure on yourself. And 1 is there's no need, no urgency to do this whatsoever. So if you've got your four numbers, send them on along. I've seen some people have sent already. Uh, huh? Okay, I see a couple trends here.
Mm-hmm.
Got some high numbers. That's interesting when you have high numbers and a change hasn't happened yet. That's an interesting one when you have lots of tens. Very motivated group.
Yeah.
All right. So again, I love doing this with clients, and I get their numbers. And the first thing that I derive from these scores is the low score is the reason this hasn't happened yet. Now, where I see all nines and tens, I'm real curious what's going on there. That's a different story. But the low score I affectionately refer to as the anchor score. And that's the low score. That's the reason this change hasn't happened yet. And if you see under each of these categories, you see the question, why is it that number and not a lower number? And there's some different opinions about how to do this. I love asking why it's that number, not a lower number. And I also like asking, what would it take to move this number up? What would have to
Mm-hmm.
happen to move it up? Um, and the reason, so again, by asking that question, you are gauging that person's, you're finding out where their ambivalence is. what are the things that are driving this, and what are the things that may be, inhibiting it? Um, and a few people are sharing what they're doing, what their change might be, which is fine. Um, so again, so if your low was a 5, say on desire, okay, why is it 5 and why isn't it a 4? What are the things that are pushing that score up to a 5? And then the next question I'd like to know is, okay, so what would make it a 6? Hypothetically, what would have to happen to turn that 5 into a 6? Because that kind of sets the stage for where you're going from there. So let's see, a couple hypotheses that I've seen is that um, the score that I see is most often the anchor score is ability. Usually about 2/3 of the time, and I haven't done the math here yet, about 2/3 of the time, the number one reason that people haven't made the change is because they're afraid they're going to fail. And that's interesting. That's a very interesting one. Another hypothesis I have is that desire and need tend to work as opposites.
Mhm.
If desire is very high, need might be low, and that's the reason the change hasn't happened yet. You want it, but there isn't that urgency or need to do it. Flip side, if there's a lot of need, that might not help the desire part of it or not. I have to do it. I don't want to do it, and that's a different thing. In one of the previous groups, we had a woman who listed that her desire was 1 and her need was 10, and I thought that was kind of interesting. And I was trying to ask a question to her without asking what it was she wanted to change. And so while I was waffling around trying to figure out a smart way to say that, what I finally came up with was, if your need score came down, if your need score wasn't a 10, if your need score came down to an 8 or a 6 or something like that, would your desire score go up? And she said to me, my husband thinks I'm fat.
Mm.
And I went, oh boy. First of all, not touching that with a 10-foot pole. But secondly, does that question still hold? Is the reason the desire is so low is because the need is so high? And to me, that speaks to kind of what we do as mental health professionals. We kind of we're cheerleaders for change. And by doing that, that's where we develop that's where ambivalence turns into resistance. We're pushing, so the person pushes back. We in essence undermine the change process by advocating, too hard for it, instead of, like we were talking about with David before, listening, pulling alongside, validating, meeting the client where they are. So let's take a look at this. So the other thing about this, so take a look at your anchor score, which one's your anchor score, and you may have more than one. I see a few that are more than one. So what do you do if you have someone whose desire is their low score? Because there's a different intervention for each anchor score. So one intervention for desire is just to talk about what um, what it is, what would the benefits be? If you do this thing, how's this going to work for you? Let's really step into what would your life be like after making this change. They may not have pictured, they may be more afraid of success than failure, which is often the case. So what is there to like about this thing? What are the benefits of this thing? Let's spend time talking about that. Maybe we need to do that before we even start the work of actually making this change. Let's work on that part of it. Ability. If ability is your anchor score, two interventions that I can think of off the top of my head, and there are others. One is past successes. Does this person need to be built up a bit? And David, I'm thinking about your client again with this one. If they've received a lot of negativity and criticism and direction, they might not have such a great view of their own ability to do things. Hence the victim behavior. So where are their past successes? Where have they been successful before? And let's play that up. I use people that have quit smoking as a very common tool. We have a lot of people that have quit smoking as like, look, if you can quit smoking, what aren't you capable of? That's a tough one. That's a tough one for anybody. And the other one is, and I think this speaks to Mel's point, um, how can we make the goal specific, and maybe how do we reduce it? So if the thing you wanted to change was to lose 30 pounds, okay, that's tough. Have you ever done that before? Because that might be very difficult for you to do. Or how about 10 pounds? Or how about 10 pounds and be able to keep those 10 pounds off for a period of time? Some of our change, when we talk about change, we do it a little sloppy. We don't make very specific goals, or we make goals that are very difficult to achieve. Wouldn't you rather lose 5 pounds at a time and keep it off than just set this aspirational goal of 30, which is going to happen somehow? So for ability, the two interventions I think of as past successes, building that person up, particularly with affirmations. And then the other one is making smaller specific goals, maybe objectives on the way to getting to that goal. Because you have to lose 5 pounds before you lose 30. It's a necessary step on the path. If reason is the low score, the anchor score, then what I think is going on is that person isn't convinced that's the way. Is there another way I can get that higher paying job without going to school? There's still the ambivalence is I don't know which way to take yet. So it's more kind of thinking through the process. Again, a payoff matrix. What are all the things I'm going to get out of this change? What are the things I'm going to have to give up, or what are the consequences of change? That whole, you hear very much contemplation. A person's one foot on the ship and one on the shore as far as making this change. So is there another way? Is there some other way of getting where you want to get to? And that's why this is the low score.
Ken, would it be helpful for me to share the payoff matrix while we're talking about it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's not a bad idea because we got the scores up already. And in the last time I'll talk about okay, so here we go. So the payoff matrix right here. Another great thing to do with your clients. If it looks like a pro and con list, it's because it is. It's just hyped up a little bit. So going from the top left, the benefits of change. So here are all the things that will happen as a result of this change. And then let's move to the top right, the benefits of not changing. So what's the good part about staying the same? Because no matter what a behavior is, it still has a benefit. It still does something. That's why it's here. And that's why it has staying power. So the benefits of doing nothing and just staying the same, what's the good part of that? And don't underestimate the power of then I won't fail. If I don't try, then I won't fail. That's very powerful because people and all of us know if we've tried something repeatedly, we shame ourselves. You get to that relapse stage of change, and there's a lot of shame that happens. So people take the attitude of it's better not to try. And then on the bottom left, we have consequences of change. Any positive change has a consequence to it. Anything you do, eating better might cost more money. A gym takes time that you may have been doing other things with. Medications have side effects. There's always a downside to this change, and that's one of the reasons it hasn't happened yet. The problem is using that downside as the reason to not make any change at all. And then on the bottom right, we have the consequences of not changing. So what happens if I don't make this change? What's going to happen to me? So in a weird way, this is like a 2x2 pro and con list. And when I do this with clients, I have them put stuff in each box. And then what I'll do is within each quadrant, I'll ask them to circle the one that's most important. A person may only have one reason for not making a change, but that reason is more powerful than the 20 reasons they have to change. And that's something I need to know. If I'm going to help them through this process, I got to know what's on both sides of the equation. So I think this is a great form that, again, people can fill it out themselves, or you can work with it with them to fill this out and give them sort of a blueprint of both those sides of the scale, the reasons for change and the reasons to not change.
And we'll send these out with the PowerPoint and other materials.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we'll get all this stuff out to you.
Do you do a long term and short term on that payoff?
You can. And if you want to find a form that's really helpful with that, it's in Smart Recovery. Smartrecovery.org has a toolbox, and they have something like that breaks it out short term and long term. Great question. And so the last one is so getting back to the darn. So the last one is need. So again, this is that internal pressure, external pressure. So if this is your anchor score, and I see it is for at least one person, you just don't have the urgency, or you don't have the pressure to do it. You want to do it, you can do it, you have these other secondary gains, but there's no urgency, there's no push. And so I'm always curious with people who this is their low score. There's two things I'm always curious about. One is, what are they waiting for? So I love the question of, okay, so if your need is a low score, the one I see is a 7, and that's pretty high. I would ask, all right, what would make it an 8? What would have to happen to make it an 8? What would have to make it a 9? What would have to happen to make it a 10? And here's the other one, and this is just suspicion on my side, but I would love to hear some confirmation, or a good argument, a good counter argument. Is My belief is that a lot of us who work in this field are caretakers, and we are really good at taking care of other people, and maybe less good at taking care of ourselves. And maybe we are the people that help other people to change, but who helps us? Who supports us? So the one thing I ask about need is, what are you waiting for? What's the thing that would make that score bounce up? The other question that I would ask is, what sort of support do you have to make this change? Are you so busy being the support to other people making this change that maybe you either don't have or don't utilize the supports that you could make? So that's a bit of a self-critical eye there, but again, those of us who take care of other people, maybe not always the best at taking care of ourselves. Where is that support that you need that will either nurture your change, or if you all have that friend or person in your life that kicks you in the butt when you need it, to get you moving in the right direction. Uh, I married mine, so that was a that was a good move on my part. But you have to have that person. You know who they are. I don't know who they are in your life. Uh, and I think sometimes this is a consequence of being in the helping profession. So this is where I go with the need. If everything else is real high, and I saw a few people that had really high desirability and reason, lower need, that's my first suspicion. And then the other one is well, what are you waiting for? If there's this change you need to make, are you waiting for something bad to happen to make this change happen? And I do not want to. I just became decaffeinated at my doctor's advice, so I know a little bit about what I'm talking about here. Something I would not do for myself. I hung around and waited for it. That's how that works. Who supports the supporters? Mel says. Absolutely correct. Especially if we don't support ourselves and don't reach out to the people that we have. Are we accessing those? If you don't have, that's one thing. If you're not accessing supports that you have, that's another. I don't mean for that to sound critical, but I'm guilty of it, and I'm guessing I'm not alone.
Thank you, Ken.
Have you guys had 10s all the way down, and
Now, I
there
saw
was no
somebody who had.
change?
I love that. I have never seen somebody when everybody's at 8, 9, or 10, and change hasn't happened. The only thing I can think of is there's something external.
Mhm.
There's a hard external no. The only example that I can give you about that is, there was a woman I was working with. She hated New Jersey. Now, I love New Jersey. I was born here, was raised here, but there are a lot of things to hate about New Jersey. She wanted to move more than anything, but she was not going to move until her youngest graduated high school. So she was not going to leave. Her desire to leave New Jersey, 10. The ability, 10. Reason, 10. Need, 10. She wasn't going to do it until. And then, so my answer to her was, so that means you're going to have a graduation party and a for sale sign going up in your yard basically the same day. And she said, yeah, that's how that's going to work. So, the question there, especially with somebody who's all 10s, and I saw a few people that were all 9s and 10s. So there's a reason why this change hasn't happened yet that is as powerful as 4 10s. And I don't know what that thing is, but if I'm working with you, I need to know what that thing is. That's the thing we need to address.
And that's what you
Change happens.
say, like what's going on?
Yeah.
What's
What is
happening?
it? So if you were going to frame this in a reflection, so what I see is you've got a 10 under desire, 10 under ability, 10 under reason, 10 under need. You are all ready to go, and this change hasn't happened yet. Can you tell me about that? And that's kind of a double-sided reflection, and then the open-ended question to follow. I'm all ears. It may not be something that's changeable, or it's an external thing that needs to be addressed, but it doesn't, there's nowhere to go except, addressing this thing. Then change happens. So I love this tool, as you can tell. And I even like doing it for the same change over a period of time to see what's moved, because it doesn't come out to the same place twice.
So we were thinking for next session, since April and May is going to focus primarily on using the techniques of OARS, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries, some of what Ken already talked about a little bit today. We would like you to, when you're meeting with someone, and it could be an individual that you're working with, it could even be a family or a friend, or, it doesn't have to necessarily be someone participating in services, but we want you to think about all of the times that you're using the OARS skills. And I'll bring up the OARS worksheet. Let's see. So you can see kind of, and we'll also send this out. So an open-ended question, something that requires more than a yes or no response. Um, how? How are you feeling today? How does looking for work make you feel, whatever that might be, or what are your next steps? What are some of your thoughts around going back to school? So not using why. So kind of think about, just make a note after your discussion, or you could even ask the person, I'm training, or I'm learning these new skills. Would you mind if I took some notes? And then just kind of write down when you've used it. You could even kind of write down what it was, maybe what the question was, but more importantly, maybe little check mark and affirmation. So we're going to talk in detail about what affirmations are, but really kind of acknowledging something positive that the person is doing, and praising that, a genuine compliment. Reflections. I think many of you talked a little bit earlier in the session about using reflections, but reflecting back what the person is saying. It sounds like applying for work has been really stressful for you. It sounds like going back to school is really exciting for you. So reflecting back and then summarizing what the person is telling you, at the end or periodically throughout the session, saying something like, tell me if I have this right, and then kind of give a summary of what the person is describing to you. And we're spending the next 2 months really practicing these skills. So if you're thinking, oh, I don't really know, exactly what these are, don't worry, kind of fill this out to the best of your ability, and we're going to talk in detail about it next session. And we'll again send these off with the PowerPoint presentation, the payoff matrix, and the darn ruler. So you'll get 3 documents included in the email with the PowerPoint. Any questions?
I just want to say I like how you broke it down, Ken, and it was good. It was good.
Cool.
Thanks.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. I found these things to be extremely helpful, and I I hope you do as well.
If you can complete the survey, that would be great. We do, like to get your input for future sessions, and let us know any thoughts or feedback that you might have. Oh, yes, I'll also put a copy of OARS in the chat. So let me do that now.
Hmm.
close it out first. All right, that's in the chat. And I'll also put the link of the survey in the chat as well.
Yeah, and Joni, where if they didn't attend the trainings in the fall, who did they get the recordings from? Because I know
You know,
we sent somebody there.
yes, we've been working with Dawn Miller and Darren Poschke. I don't know if anyone is familiar with Dawn and Darren, but we can also let them know if people are looking for the recordings. But if you want to reach out to Dawn Miller or Darren, that would be a good step. And also, I don't know when you get sent the recordings or when you get sent the email blast about the upcoming webinars, there might be a name listed in those as well. I'm not familiar with who kind of keeps the repository. I know we work closely with Dawn and Darren.
Mm. Yeah, wherever you get the email to attend these things, I would probably try replying to that and saying where are those videos so that you can catch up or use them when you need them.
So thank you, everyone. Again, you'll receive copies of everything that we talked about today. If you have any questions about joining or becoming an FCS provider, you can use the number here on the screen. And thank you so much for all of your great participation. And we look forward to seeing everyone in April.
Good seeing you all again. Thanks for your time. Have a good rest of your day.